Welcome back everyone to the weekly Mailbox, your chance to ask me questions about anything you would like, Formula 1, Formula E, motorsports, anything in between. The return of the Mailbox. We've had a couple of weeks off, it's been a crazy hectic schedule. We had the 6 races in 9 days of Formula E, the continuation of Formula 1 2020, back to back Silverstone, 70th anniversary Grand Prix and Spanish Grand Prix. But now things are calming down a little bit. The Formula E season is over. We can get back on track with the Mailbox, episode 51 today. And as always, if you want to ask questions for next week's episode, throw them down on the comment section down below, DM on Instagram or send over on Twitter. But we're starting off today from Lorenzo Letta, who asks, could Red Bull promote Yuki Tsunoda to an F1 seat in 2020? And I will just mention, there were so many of you asking roughly this same question, asking about Tsunoda moving up to Formula 1, about Danny Kvyat, about Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon, and there will be a full transfer talk this weekend talking about that Red Bull seat. So today, it's a bit of a teaser really, talking about Tsunoda and his prospects for Formula 1. Yuki Tsunoda, who is a rookie in Formula 2 this year, if you aren't aware, has had a really strong start to the season. Perhaps one of the best rookie performances in the field. He is, of course, a Red Bull Junior, one of 2 Red Bull Juniors currently in Formula 2 this season, alongside his teammate Jehan Daruvula. But Tsunoda's the one who's really doing the bits for Team Carlin. Got a pole position in the second race of the season in Styria. We then saw him get his first race win, a sprint race win, a couple of weekends ago in Silverstone. And he's a driver that came up to the championship this year, not having the best junior record, had a difficult season in Formula 3, was starting to get the hang of that by the end of the year, but I certainly didn't expect him to jump up to Formula 2 and be as impressive as he is. Really gutsy on his overtakes, really quick in qualifying, and when you see some of the guys he's racing with, you've got guys like Callum Ilott, Mick Schumacher, that will feature in some later questions, that have been in Formula 2 already for one season, part of the Ferrari Young Drivers setup. You've got boys at the Renault Young Drivers setup, Guan Yu Zhou and Christian Lundgaard, and then you've got some of the, I was going to say oldies of the sport, but more experienced drivers, Luca Giotto. And Tsunoda's really just fitted in really well. Does he deserve a chance at F1? Well, word on the street is that Helmut Marko, the man who's in charge of the Red Bull Young Driver Programme, has said to Tsunoda, look, his target is top 4, and if he can get top 4, they're going to have to really consider promoting him to Formula 1. And I think that's more than fair. It's such a tough field this year. I think this is probably the most experienced and best field in Formula 2 I've ever witnessed. The first proper season I watched was the first year of Charles Leclerc, 2017, so the first real season of the named Formula 2. This has been the best grid. So many drivers that have the potential to be champion, and so many drivers that deserve to be in that top 3, that deserve a chance in Formula 1. And to think some of these guys aren't going to finish in the top 5 and that's really going to hurt their careers is really quite a shame. When you look at the 2 Renault young drivers, the 3 Ferrari young drivers, you throw in Tsunoda as well, and then you've got other guys struggling a little bit more this year. Jack Aitken is a good example. When you think of all of those, I think you can really understand why people are so excited for a lot of these youngsters in F2. AlphaTauri, of course, would be the seat he would go to. Of course, I highly doubt he would go straight to Red Bull. And the difficulty here, and we'll talk about this more, I'm going to guess Sunday will be when the transfer talk comes out. Maybe Saturday if I'm feeling generous. I think the difficulty is finding that seat. Danny Kvyat and Gasly's doing a brilliant job this year, but Kvyat's not doing too bad either. Then you've got to ask the question, what's happening with Alex Albon at Red Bull? Because if they do decide they don't want Albon, they will move him back to AlphaTauri. Then they decide who do they want at Red Bull. Then they have to work out if they've even got a seat at all for Yuki Tsunoda, yet alone a seat for Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly and Danny Kvyat. It's always been an issue for the Red Bull young drivers. I mean, we saw Antonio Felix da Costa, win the Formula E World Championship last week. never got a chance in F1, and you can see now he really, really should have, and this has always been an issue. It's a nice problem to have. Tsunoda's still got a long way to go. He's, I think, 4th or 5th in the standings at the moment, so he's just about on that bubble to potentially get that call up. But I think he's a driver that certainly would benefit from an extra season in Formula 2, win that championship, see how the grid's panning out for 2022. But he's a Japanese Honda young driver. Honda, obviously, their engine partners with Red Bull. It's a really nice fit, a really promising talent, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where Red Bull's big next star gets promoted to Formula 1. Question number 2 comes from Max Brink. Will Ferrari force Haas to give up one of their drivers for the likes of Eilert or Schwartzman, as Alfa Romeo are probably going to continue with Giovinazzi, so that both of their best academy drivers are in Formula 1? Bit of beef there with Mick Schumacher not including him in that list, but I suppose currently it is Callum Eilert and Robert Schwartzman that are at the top of Formula 2 in the pecking order, P1 and P2 for the British and Russian drivers. I've thought about this a lot, and it's really, really tricky because Ferrari are in a real conundrum, because whereas Red Bull have got Yuki Tsunoda, who's doing brilliant, they've only really got Yuki Tsunoda, who's doing brilliant this year, in their junior ranks. Ferrari, that have gone so many years with no one really. Giovinazzi was their only real driver ready for that step up to Formula 1 for maybe a good 4 or 5 years. Now all of a sudden, excluding Charles Leclerc, of course, he's been incredible. But now, Ferrari find themselves where they've got 5 young drivers in Formula 2. 4 of those which have scored podiums this season and been on the front row of the grid. So whereas Marcus Armstrong hasn't quite had that consistency, Eilert, Schwartzman and Schumacher to a degree all have and are still all very much in this championship fight. And Schumacher, though he's a little bit off those two, he's shown the pace this year that if he can just get a clean weekend together, he's going to be right back in that hunt. But it's just about getting those clean weekends on a couple of race times. So far, it's been a little bit messy, and Austria, first race of the season, perfect example, probably would have gone on to win that feature race if not for a huge mistake on a safety car restart. I think Ferrari need to get at least 2 of their drivers in Formula 1 next year. There's very likely there's going to be at least 1 seat at Alfa Romeo. I'm very much expecting Kimi Räikkönen to retire at the end of the year. But the big question then is Giovinazzi. Will he stay in that Ferrari junior designated seat? I think it's unlikely. But will Alfa Romeo want to keep Giovinazzi? That's the real question, and that's the one I'm really struggling with, because he's had a good start to the year. Don't get me wrong, it's not been a 10 out of 10 well-beater season, but he's been much closer to Kimi and beating Kimi in qualifying. In the race, there's still a little bit to be desired, but what really more can you ask from some of these guys in a car which really isn't great? Will Giovinazzi get a move elsewhere? I think that's really unlikely. So it would be most likely his final season in F1 if he was with Alfa Romeo. But when you've got Eilert, Schwartzman ready to make the step up to Formula 1, a team like Alfa Romeo is the perfect place to go. It's a risk taking 2 young drivers, but I think if you've got the team at the back already, if you've got Robert Kubica as your 3rd reserve driver, I think you can afford to take that risk. But again, it's just whether Alfa Romeo can be persuaded to have 2 Ferrari young drivers, and if they really want to get rid of Giovinazzi. And so then it comes into play what you've mentioned in your question. What will Haas do? Will Ferrari force them to take a young driver? And in all honesty, I don't even think they'll need to force them. I've said for a couple of years now, I think Haas's biggest issue is the fact that they've had the same 2 drivers for a long, long time. And yes, you can point at the fact that they want consistency. They want to learn year in, year out how their engine departments are improving, how their engineering departments, how their team as a whole is progressing, along with their 2 drivers that they're getting to know more and more each season. They know their preferences. But we've seen over the last few years that neither Grosjean and Magnussen have been completely consistent. Even 2018, when Grosjean was having his shocker of a first half, in the second half of the season, Magnussen started not doing so great, and it was Grosjean getting points. 2019 was just a mess all season long, and 2020 is, well, perhaps even a bigger mess than 2019, but at least the car is somewhat drivable. They need a change somewhere. And I think a driver, that little bit of fresh air, would really do them a lot of good. And when you've got a lot of these young drivers in play, forget the fact that they're linked with Ferrari. I think they need to take a risk on a driver. Whether it's a Perez if he's out of a seat, a Hulkenberg, whatever. I think Ferrari could quite easily force Haas, or at least persuade Haas, to take one of their drivers. And especially if it's the champion, if it's Eilert, Schwartzman, Schumacher, whoever, I think they'll be very, very interested. So I'm really looking forward to how this one plays out. I think it's all going to depend on how that championship looks at the end of the season, but I think we will see at least 2, maybe even 3 Formula 2 drivers jump up to F1 next year, which is pretty awesome, I think. Next question comes from JMS and Ice Cream Studios. 2 different questions, but I wanted to just quickly include it. JMS asks, which Formula E team do you expect to be on top next season and why? I'm expecting Mercedes to improve a lot and give a good fight for the Constructors' title. And Ice Cream Studios asks, how do you see the fight between Sam Bird and Mitch Evans panning out next year at Jaguar? I think Formula E, we discussed it yesterday, didn't we? It's so impossible to predict. The championship this year, though it was comfortably won by Da Costa, behind him was so close. And I think everyone from 2nd down to 10th was separated by 16 points. That just really just shows how close and how unpredictable Formula E is. To Cheetah, you expect to be right there on the pace. They've got 2 brilliant drivers, a fantastic powertrain, and they've now got 3 years of championship winning experience. Ice Cream in his question mentions Jaguar. I think they're going to be a real force this year. 2 really strong drivers. I think that really held them back last year, was having a brilliant driver, Mitch Evans, but a struggling rookie in James Collado. So having 2 race winners in that Jaguar, I think is a brilliant combo and will really help them push on. Nissan, we've seen what they've been able to do this year. Take that next step. 4th and 5th in the standings this year. A win for the first time for Ollie Rowland. No for Sebastian Buemi this year, but he did get one in the final race of the season prior in Season 5 in New York. They've always had a good car. When they were Renault, they were winning championships, winning races. And the last 2 years for Nissan, it's been really strong. They've had to completely change their powertrain this year. They completely changed the philosophy of it, thanks to their dual powertrain, I think is the official term for it, was banned at the end of last season. So they had to go back to the drawing board, and what a car they made for this year. I think they will push on next year as well. You've got guys then that might spring a bit of a surprise. Virgin are having a big change, having to bring in Nick Cassidy. Now Sam Bird's leaving. Robin Freins, can he find a little bit of consistency that he didn't have this year? BMW are making changes. Max Gunter's staying. Can he make that next step up from this year? But who's he going to have alongside him? I think they're going to need someone with a bit of experience. But it looks like they're bringing Philip Eng from DTM. Porsche, Verline's coming in. Lotterer, that's a really strong mix. And of course, never discount Audi. De Grassi, first season in Formula E, he didn't win a race this year, which is a big surprise, but you can understand and give some of these drivers a bit of an excuse considering everything that's gone on this year. But Audi, I hope they keep Rene Rast. He was really impressive in those last few rounds. And they would be my guesses. But I think, as you're alluding to, Mercedes, they got a 1-2 in the final race. They've got a brilliant young driver pairing. Van Dorn now with his first win. De Vries with his first podium in that last race. I think Techeetah are going to be at the front. I think Nissan are going to be closer. And then I'll put Porsche and Mercedes in that fight as well. But I'd love to know your thoughts in that comment section down below. And what about Neo? I'll leave that there. Question number 4 comes from Rangappa Palana Roshan, I think is how we go with that one. Does the engine mode change for qualifying affect overall race pace in your opinion? Will it be an advantage for Racing Point, Ferrari, McLaren to compete with Red Bull? I haven't actually mentioned my feelings on this, just yet. I think the news came out, I think it was just maybe before or just after the weekend preview last weekend. So it might have gone in the newsroom, but if not, hey, it's in the mailbox. I think this isn't going to have much of an effect all round, to be totally honest. The idea of getting rid of the party modes for qualifying is that all of the teams, Mercedes all the way down to Williams, Renault, every engine, every team, they won't be able to use their max engine mode in qualifying. And the only real reason we've been given, or loosely given, to why they have done this is to try and bring back Mercedes a little bit closer to that chasing pack. And you can understand why they want to do that. This season, they're hoping to get closer racing, but don't forget next season, we're going to see cars that are almost identical to this year's. There's not going to be much development on these machines. There will be some, of course, but the pecking order, for the most part, is going to remain the same. So Formula One are trying to just reel them in a little bit. I think, though, what kind of effect is that going to have? I don't think it's going to be a lot. Mercedes, even without qualifying mode, I still think could easily be 5, 6, maybe 7 or 8 tenths quicker than the closest challenger in Red Bull. And I think what we also shouldn't forget is that every team is getting this ban. So Red Bull will also lose their party mode and so on back down the order. It's kind of widely agreed that Mercedes have the best party mode, but not only is that going to affect Mercedes, it's also going to affect our third fastest team, Racing Point. So do now we lose that fight for a potential podium? Maybe. And what about Williams? It's been great seeing them get a little bit more competitive this year. But if they lose their quali mode, are they slumped back down to the back of the grid? It's a very strange change. I think what's even weirder about it is that they decided to do it in the middle of the season. Of course, we'll see the real effects of this in Belgium next weekend, but I really don't think it'll make a lot of difference. I just hope it doesn't make things worse, which it can sometimes do with these quick fixes in Formula One. But I wouldn't worry too much, guys. Will it mean Racing Point, Ferrari, McLaren can compete with Red Bull? I highly doubt it. They're all having the same nerf. Some teams will be slightly more affected, but I think for the most part, if people didn't tell us, I really don't think we would notice. And our final question, our audience participation question, comes from Jaden Agutu. If you don't know about the audience participation question, it's your chance to give me your answers in the comment section down below. And I've gone for one this week in preparation of maybe an impending bit of news, but we'll crack on with the question and we'll hear what you guys think. They say Sebastian Vettel is to sign the contract with Racing Point in Belgium, and he already had signed during the British Grand Prix, but was not announced due to Perez testing positive. If it is true, who do you think he will replace? When do you think it will go public? I've kind of slapped this, you can see at the bottom, who, what, when, where. It's one of those ones now which is dragging on so much, and if this kind of is true, that they didn't announce it because of everything going on with Perez, fair play and respect to Racing Point. But I think at the same time, I speak obviously for myself, but I think a lot of people as well are in this limbo where it would be great to see Vettel get this opportunity to get away from Ferrari, which is just becoming more and more of a mess every time we show up to a Grand Prix weekend. Get out of there. But at the same time, Perez doesn't deserve to be kicked out of that team. Not only due to the fact he's a brilliant driver and deserves a top drive, not only that he's been with this team now since 2014, not only the fact that he saved this team from collapsing in 2018, what then? I mean, what's Lance Stroll? He is having a great year. He is leading that team at the moment, and I think it's progressed really nicely this year. People forget that Lance Stroll is the second youngest driver on the grid at the moment. Norris is the youngest, then it's Lance Stroll, and Stroll himself now has got a real nice bit of experience in Formula One, and has got one of the longest careers left along with Norris, being the youngest. So you kind of think, well, do they need a change? I did think at the beginning of the year there could be a change on the cards, but Stroll has impressed so much this year. Perez has continued to be the Perez we've seen for years and years, consistent and challenging on the outside of those podiums. Of course, he missed those 2 races at Silverstone and is still doing bits in the driver's standings. I think, why do they really need a change? But it looks like Seb is coming. We saw that cheeky elbow fist bump from him and Stroll in the paddock a couple of weeks ago. It seems to be coming. Belgian Grand Prix? I'm not too sure. Who will they replace? If anyone, I think it'll be Sergio, but Stroll did do an interview with Ziggo Sport, I think it was, a couple of weeks ago, maybe suggesting otherwise. But I really get stuck on this one. So I'd love to know your thoughts in that. I know I've copped out, apologies. I'd love to know your thoughts in that comment section down below. And that is it for this week's episode of the weekly Mailbox. Thank you all very much for watching. If you are new, feel free to subscribe, like if you enjoyed, and if you've got a question for next week's episode, Instagram, Twitter, comment section down below. Thank you guys, have a nice day. Transfer talk over the weekend, I'm looking forward to that one. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.